My name is Serena, and I wish I could tell you that my life began like a fairy tale. But the truth is, it never did. I grew up in a house that was filled with voices, but none of those voices ever spoke to me. My parents were always busy. Busy fighting, busy surviving, busy with everything, except me. I was the quiet child. The one who sat in the corner with a doll in her hand, watching the world around her fall apart. I used to think that if I stayed silent enough, maybe they would notice me. Maybe they would turn around and say, "Serena, we love you. You matter." But those words never came. Instead, I heard the shouting of my father, the tired sighs of my mother, the slamming of doors. I heard everything, except love. At school, I wasn't the girl everyone wanted to be friends with. I wasn't the one with the perfect hair or the sparkling laugh. I was just Serena, the girl who carried sadness in her eyes, the girl who always walked alone. I used to sit by the window in my room at night, staring at the stars. They were the only friends I had. I whispered my secrets to them, my fears, my loneliness. I told them things I couldn't tell anyone else. And every night I asked them the same question. Why does no one see me? Why does no one want me? But the stars, they never answered. Do you know how it feels to be a ghost in your own life? To watch everyone else laughing, holding hands, building memories while you're just invisible? That was me. That was Serena. I longed for love. I craved it more than air. I wanted someone to look at me the way people in movies look at each other. With softness, with meaning, with forever in their eyes. But all I had was silence. Every birthday passed like any other day. No celebrations, no cake, no warm hugs. Just me, sitting quietly, making a wish I knew would never come true. Please let someone love me, just once. The loneliness grew heavier as I grew older. It became a shadow that followed me everywhere. Even in a room full of people, I felt alone. Even when I smiled, inside I was breaking. And I remember one night when I was about 14, I cried so hard into my pillow that I thought my chest would explode. I whispered into the darkness. Maybe I'm not meant to be loved. Maybe I'm not enough. That thought, it stayed with me. It haunted me. It became the truth I carried inside. But what I didn't know then was that one day someone would walk into my life. Someone who would make me believe I was worth something. Someone who would teach me what love feels like before teaching me what heartbreak really is. And that was the beginning of everything. The beginning of my greatest hope and my deepest pain. My life began to change when I was 16. Up until then, I was just the quiet, invisible girl. The one nobody noticed. The one who always kept her head down. But then, he came. His name was Adrian. And for the first time in my life, someone actually saw me. It was in the library. I was sitting in my usual corner, hiding behind a book, trying to escape the noise of the world. and suddenly I felt a shadow fall over me. When I looked up, there he was, tall, confident, with the kind of smile that could break walls. He asked me, "Do you mind if I sit here?" Nobody had ever asked me that before. I remember nodding, too nervous to speak, my heart racing so fast I thought he could hear it. From that day on, he kept showing up. Sometimes with a book in his hand, sometimes with a silly joke, sometimes just sitting there in silence beside me. And slowly, I began to feel alive. He made me laugh. Do you know how rare that was? For a girl who had cried herself to sleep for years, laughter felt like sunlight after endless rain. Adrian noticed things about me no one ever had. He noticed how I twisted my fingers when I was nervous. He noticed how I always sat near windows, as if I was waiting for something outside. He noticed my silence, and instead of ignoring it, he filled it with kindness. One evening, as we walked home together, he said, "Serena, you don't realize how special you are. You think nobody sees you, but I do. I see you." Those words, they broke me and healed me at the same time. Nobody had ever said them to me. Nobody had ever made me feel like I mattered. I started writing about him in my diary. Pages and pages of thoughts, of dreams, of the way he made my heart race. I would draw little hearts around his name, like a silly girl, because for the first time in forever, I wasn't lonely anymore. He became my best friend, my safe place, my everything. And somewhere between all those library afternoons and late-night talks, I fell in love. But I never told him. I was too afraid. Afraid that if I said it out loud, I would lose him. Afraid that love, like everything else in my life, would slip through my fingers. So I kept it inside. Every heartbeat, every smile, every unspoken "I love you." I carried it all silently, and yet I let myself believe that maybe this was the beginning of the happiness I had prayed for as a child. Believe that maybe Adrian was the answer to all those nights I had cried alone. What I didn't know was that love has two faces. One is light, warm, breathtaking, and the other is darkness, cold and merciless. And soon, I was going to meet the other face. I thought love was supposed to be simple. You meet someone, they make your heart race, and you hold on to them forever. That's what I believed when Adrian became my everything. We spent hours together, sometimes in the library, sometimes walking by the river, sometimes just sitting on the school stairs talking about life, about dreams, about the future. He told me he wanted to travel the world, to see places he had only read about in books. And I told him I wanted to feel at home somewhere. Not in a house, not in a city, but in a person. And for a while, I thought that person was him. Adrian had this way of making me forget my sadness. When I was with him, The weight in my chest felt lighter. I laughed more in those months than I had in my entire childhood. I didn't feel invisible anymore, because in his eyes I existed. But slowly, things started to change. He became more distracted. Sometimes he wouldn't show up at the library. Sometimes he would cancel our walks. When I asked him if something was wrong, he would smile and say, "Nothing, Serena. Don't worry." But his smile didn't reach his eyes anymore. One evening, I saw him across the street talking to another girl. He looked so alive, so carefree. And something inside me broke. Not because he talked to her, but because in that moment I realized I wasn't the only one who made him smile. I tried to ignore it. I told myself, he's my friend, he cares about me. That's enough. But late at night, when I wrote in my diary, my words were filled with fear. Fear of losing him. Fear of going back to being invisible again. One night, as we sat by the river, I finally gathered the courage to ask him, "Adrian, am I important to you?" He looked at me, his eyes soft, and said, "Of course you are, Serena. You're my best friend. You're the one I can always count on." Best friend. Those two words cut deeper than any knife. I wanted to hear something else, anything else. But instead, I smiled through the tears burning in my eyes and whispered, "That means everything to me." But inside, I was breaking. Because I realized then, he was my world, but I was just a chapter in his story. He was the reason I breathed, but I was only his safe place when the world got too heavy. I loved him silently, desperately, painfully. And every day that silence grew heavier. Still, I held on. Because sometimes when you've been lonely your whole life, even half love feels like enough. Even borrowed moments feel like forever. But deep down, I knew forever doesn't last. And mine was slipping away. I always thought if I loved him enough, he would stay. If I was patient enough, kind enough, loyal enough, maybe Adrian would one day look at me the way I looked at him. But life doesn't work that way. Love doesn't always reward you for being good. Sometimes, it punishes you for it. Adrian began to drift further away. He stopped coming to the library altogether. Our late-night conversations grew shorter, colder. Days would pass without a message, and when I finally gathered the courage to ask him why, he simply said, "I've been busy." Busy. Such a small word, but it carried the weight of rejection. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, that he still cared, that he still needed me. But deep down, I could feel it. The distance, the silence, the slow unraveling of everything I had built my fragile heart upon. And then, the day came that shattered me completely. I was walking down the hallway at school when I saw him, Adrian, standing with that same girl I had once noticed. But this time, it wasn't just laughter between them. It was closeness. It was the way he leaned into her, The way his hand brushed against hers. The way his eyes lit up in a way I had prayed they would light up for me. I froze. It felt like the ground beneath me had disappeared. He saw me standing there. Our eyes met for a second. Just a second. And in that second, I realized everything. I was never the one. I was never going to be the one. I walked away before he could say anything. My chest felt like it was tearing open with every step. By the time I reached the bathroom, tears were streaming down my face uncontrollably. I locked myself in a stall, covered my mouth with both hands, and cried until my body shook. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break something. But all I did was whisper to myself, why wasn't I enough? Why am I never enough? That night, I wrote in my diary, he has someone else now, and I only have my loneliness. Still, when he texted me later that week, just a casual, "Hey, how are you?" I answered. I couldn't stop myself. Because even though my heart was breaking, even though he was slipping away, I would rather have pieces of him than nothing at all. And that was my biggest mistake. Because holding on to someone who doesn't want to stay only makes the fall so much harder. I used to believe heartbreak was just a word. Something people exaggerated in movies or books. But when it finally happened to me, I realized it's real. It's a wound you cannot see, but it bleeds inside you every second. Adrian had chosen her. I knew it. He knew it. Everyone around us probably knew it. But I refused to let go. I kept holding on to the pieces of him he occasionally gave me. A smile in the hallway. A short text message. A half-hearted hug. And every time I told myself, maybe he still cares. Maybe there's still hope. But hope is cruel. It keeps you alive just long enough to watch yourself die slowly. One evening, I saw them together again. This time, there was no doubt. His hand was in hers. They looked like everything I had prayed for, everything I had dreamed of. Only it wasn't mine. It was hers. I remember running home that day. My vision blurred by tears, my chest aching as though my heart was physically breaking apart. I locked myself in my room, buried my face in the pillow, and screamed until my voice cracked. I felt worthless, invisible, forgotten. I kept asking myself over and over, what did she have that I didn't? What made me so easy to leave behind? Days turned into weeks, and I slipped deeper into silence. I stopped going to the library. I stopped writing in my diary. Even the stars outside my window, the ones I used to whisper my secrets to, felt like strangers now. I was drowning in my own sadness, and nobody noticed. Not my parents, not my friends. No one. Everyone thought I was fine because I had mastered the art of smiling through pain. But inside, I was falling apart. At night, I would lie awake, replaying every memory with Adrian in my mind. His laughter, his words, the way he once said, "I see you, Serena." And now, he didn't see me at all. Sometimes I would whisper into the darkness, "Adrian, why couldn't you love me back? Why wasn't I enough?" But of course, there was no answer. Only silence, silence, the same silence I had lived with my entire life. Only this time, it was louder, heavier, crushing me piece by piece. I started to wonder if maybe love wasn't meant for me. Maybe some people are born to be loved, and some people are born to watch from the sidelines. Maybe I was always meant to be invisible. And yet, even in the middle of that pain, even when my heart was bleeding, a small part of me still hoped he would come back. That one day he would realize I was the one who truly cared, the one who never left. But deep inside, I knew the truth. The boy I loved more than anything in this world was never coming back to me. People say time heals everything, but what they don't tell you is that sometimes time doesn't heal. It just teaches you how to hide the pain better. Weeks passed after Adrian walked out of my world. He didn't even realize what he had taken from me. He didn't know that he left me with pieces too sharp to hold, but too precious to throw away. I tried to distract myself. I threw myself into schoolwork. I joined a few clubs. I smiled when people talked to me, laughed when I was supposed to. On the outside, I looked fine, maybe even stronger. But on the inside, every smile was fake. Every laugh was hollow. Because no matter what I did, I still thought about him. I thought about the sound of his voice, the way his eyes lit up when he talked about his dreams, the comfort I felt when he sat beside me in silence. And now all I had were memories. Memories that cut deeper than knives. Sometimes when I passed the library, I would feel my chest tighten. I couldn't go inside anymore, because that place held too many ghosts. Our ghosts, our laughter, our whispers, our silences. All of it haunted me. At night, the loneliness came back stronger than ever. I would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling like the walls were closing in on me. I would cry quietly, so nobody could hear. And sometimes I even held my phone in my hand, waiting for a message that never came. The worst part? He was happy. I saw him once walking with her, holding her hand like she was the only girl in the world. And the way he looked at her, it was the way I had always wished he would look at me. That sight killed me more than words can describe, because it wasn't just that he loved someone else, it was that he loved someone else the way I had loved him. Fully, deeply, unconditionally. And me? I was just a memory he didn't bother to keep. I started writing again, but my diary pages turned darker. No more little hearts around his name. Just broken sentences, scribbles of pain, words like empty, invisible, unwanted. Still, I carried on, because that's what people do, right? We carry on, even when we're broken. We wake up, we breathe, we pretend. And maybe the world never knows the weight we carry. But every step I took, I carried him with me. Every laugh I faked, I remembered the real ones he gave me. Every silence I endured, I heard his voice echoing in my mind. Adrian had moved on, but I was stuck, trapped in the ruins of what I thought we had. And the scariest part was, I didn't know if I would ever find a way out. They say heartbreak changes you, and now I know, though, it's true. After Adrian, I wasn't the same girl anymore. The Serena who used to dream, who used to believe in love, who used to wait for miracles, she was gone. What remained was someone quieter, sadder, heavier. I stopped trusting easily. I stopped letting people close. Whenever someone showed kindness, my first thought was, they'll leave me too. And so, I built walls. High walls, invisible walls, to protect myself from being hurt again. But the irony is, those walls didn't protect me. They only made me lonelier. I remember one evening, sitting by the window of my room, looking outside at the sunset. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, the kind of colors Adrian once said reminded him of hope. And as I watched the sky, I whispered to myself, hope doesn't live here anymore. Still, life didn't stop. I had to wake up, go to school, pretend that I was fine, pretend that Adrian's absence didn't echo in every corner of my soul. But pretending is exhausting. Sometimes I would catch myself staring at my reflection in the mirror and not recognizing the girl I saw. Her eyes looked tired. Her smile was forced. Her face carried shadows of sleepless nights. I began to avoid people. Friends noticed. Some asked, "Are you okay, Serena?" I always answered, "I'm fine." Because how could I explain that my heart was still bleeding over someone who probably hadn't thought of me in months? One night, I found myself walking near the river, the same place Adrian and I used to sit together. I don't even remember how I got there, but when I looked at the water, memories came rushing back like waves crashing against rocks. I sat on the cold ground and whispered into the night, "Adrian, I don't hate you." I wish I did. It would make everything easier. But the truth is, I still love you. And I hate myself for it. Tears rolled down my cheeks, and for the first time, I didn't try to stop them. I let myself cry, fully, openly, until my body trembled. And in that breaking, something inside me shifted. It wasn't healing, not yet. But it was the beginning of acceptance. The acceptance that maybe Adrian was never mine to keep. The acceptance that sometimes love isn't about holding on. It's about learning how to let go. Still, letting go felt impossible. But as I walked back home that night with swollen eyes and a heavy heart, I realized something important. If I was going to survive this pain, I had to find a way to live for myself, not for him. And maybe, just maybe, life was about to lead me somewhere new, somewhere I never expected. They say every ending is also a beginning, but when you're living inside the ending, all you feel is loss. Months passed, and Adrian became just another face in the crowd. He walked past me sometimes, and I could almost pretend we were strangers. Almost. Because deep down, I could never forget what he meant to me, even if he had forgotten me long ago. I still carried him in my heart, but in a different way. The ache was still there, the emptiness still sharp, but it wasn't as wild, wasn't as raw. It was quieter now, like an old wound that never fully heals but doesn't bleed anymore. One afternoon, I sat in the library again for the first time after so long. The same table where we once shared whispers, secrets, and dreams. The chair across from me was empty, but strangely, I didn't cry this time. I opened my diary, the one filled with pain, anger, and heartbreak, and I turned to a fresh page. For a long time, I stared at the blankness, my pen trembling in my hand, and then, slowly, I wrote, "Dear Serena, you survived." For the first time in months, those words felt real. I had survived the sleepless nights, the crying spells, the loneliness that swallowed me whole. The pain of watching the boy I loved give his heart to someone else. I was still here, maybe broken, maybe scarred, but alive. That night, I looked at the stars again. The same stars I had once spoken to as a child, the same stars I had cursed when Adrian left. And this time, instead of asking, why wasn't I enough? I whispered something different. One day, I will be enough. For myself. Tears still filled my eyes, but they weren't only of sadness. There was something else mixed in. Something softer, gentler, hope. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe I'll find love again. Maybe I won't. Maybe my story will always carry the ache of Adrian's absence. But I know one thing. I am stronger than I thought I was. Because I loved deeply. I hurt deeply. And still, I'm here, breathing, moving forward. Adrian was a chapter of my story, not the whole book. And as I closed my diary that night, I whispered to myself, the story of Serena isn't over yet. It's just beginning. And for the first time in a long, long time, I believed it.